The sound was subtle at first, barely noticeable over the quiet hum of Beatrice Linton's kettle. A soft plink, like a droplet tapping porcelain. She turned off the gas and listened again. Another plink. It came from upstairs. Sighing, Beatrice reached for her cardigan, wrapping it tightly around her narrow shoulders as she climbed the stairs of the old stone cottage. Rain had been falling all morning, soaking the sleepy village of Chipping Wickham, and she feared the storm had found its way in. At the top of the stairs, she turned left towards the guest bedroom, then hesitated. The sound was not from there, it was above. The attic. She hadn't opened that creaking wooden hatch in years. The pull string dangled like a forgotten relic. With a quiet huff, she reached up and tugged. A thin film of dust rained down as the hatch dropped open and the ladder slid out stiffly. Beatrice climbed slowly, each rung creaking under her modest weight. The attic was dark, save for a faint glow from the single window at the far end. The smell of aged wood and mothballs filled her nose. She made her way towards the source of the dripping and found the leak, just a small one, near the chimney breast. As she moved some boxes aside to place the bucket underneath, her knee bumped against something solid. A wooden trunk. It was the kind of trunk one might expect to find in a childhood memory, a deep, brass-handled chest with flaking green paint and initials carved faintly into the top, E.L. Edward Linton. Her late husband. Beatrice froze. She hadn't seen that trunk since the day after his funeral, almost 12 years ago. That morning, she had cleared some of his clothes, packed a few belongings away, then locked the attic and never returned. She hesitated only a moment before lifting the lid. Inside were papers, old receipts, theatre tickets, photographs. Things she'd long forgotten. A small stack of birthday cards tied with a ribbon, each one in Edward's distinctive looping handwriting. She picked up the bundle, expecting to find messages he'd written to her. But the top card was addressed not to Beatrice, but to someone named A. Her fingers trembled. She unfolded the card. To my dearest A. I missed you yesterday. I always miss you when I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Yours always. E. Beatrice's heart began to race. She rummaged deeper into the trunk, uncovering more letters, dozens of them, all tied in little bundles. The handwriting was Edward's, but the tone, the words, they were intimate, raw, filled with longing. And none of them were for her. The attic no longer felt like part of her home. It felt like a stranger's hiding place. As the rain hammered harder on the roof above her, Beatrice stood frozen, one hand clutching the letter, the other still inside the box that held a version of her husband she had never known. And then she noticed something else, an address, scribbled in the corner of one of the envelopes. It wasn't local. It was somewhere in Devon. And it was dated only a month before Edward's death. Beatrice stepped back, pulse thudding. Her husband had been writing to another woman, right up until the end. She took a deep breath, eyes flicking towards the hatch and the house below. She couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. The rain had eased by morning, but the storm within Beatrice had only just begun. She had barely slept. The letters, now stacked neatly on her kitchen table, stared at her like a row of silent witnesses. She had read nearly all of them, one after the other, through the night, her tea growing cold, her eyes dry from the lack of tears. The woman's name was Amelia. Edward had written to her with a tenderness Beatrice hadn't seen in years, perhaps ever. The words in the letters were private, poetic even. He spoke of longing, of meetings in London, of brief weekends in seaside towns. There were hints of regrets, of promises made and broken. And all the while, Beatrice had been there, making his supper, laying out his suits, tending the roses in the front garden, unaware that a whole other life had been blooming in secret. She hadn't yet told anyone. Who would she tell? Her sister Margaret would only respond with tight-lipped fury, and the vicar's wife would clutch her pearls and offer a casserole. Beatrice took a walk through the village to clear her thoughts. The cottages of Chipping Wickham lined the green like painted toys, each with its own tidy garden and whitewashed walls. People greeted her with warm smiles, none of them aware that she was unraveling. By afternoon, she found herself in the library where she worked part-time. The building smelled of old paper and polished wood, a comfort she didn't expect to need. But her mind wasn't on reshelving books or stamping loan cards. She kept thinking of that address in Devon. Westcombe-by-Sea. It was a coastal village she'd heard of only in passing, a postcard-perfect place with cliffs and boats and white sands. The envelope had no surname, just Amelia, and a small cottage number. She sat behind the librarian's desk, staring at the screen of the old computer. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Just a look, she told herself. She typed in the village name, then added the street and the cottage number. A holiday rental site popped up. Primrose Cottage, let by someone named Amelia Thorne. Her pulse quickened. It was her. She was real. Beatrice closed the browser and pressed her hands to her temples. What was she doing? Spying on a ghost? Chasing the shadow of a man who'd already gone? But something inside her wouldn't rest. She couldn't pretend these letters hadn't surfaced. Couldn't go back to crossword puzzles and Sunday roasts like nothing had changed. By evening, she'd made her decision. She packed a small overnight bag, fed the cat, and left a note on the mantelpiece in case Margaret dropped by, gone to the coast for a few days. Need some air, B. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She booked a train ticket. Beatrice sat in the dim station waiting room that night, coat buttoned tight, scarf drawn close, letters clutched in her handbag. A man across from her read a newspaper, and a student next to him tapped away on a laptop. No one paid her any mind. And for the first time in a long while, she felt utterly invisible. But not weak. There was something powerful in movement, in choosing to act instead of simply accept. When the train pulled in, she stepped on board without looking back. She didn't know what she would say to Amelia Thorne. She didn't even know if she'd say anything at all. But she was going to Westcombe-by-Sea. And she was going to find out who Edward really was. The sea air hit her the moment she stepped off the train at Westcombe Station, a sharp, salty breeze that wrapped around her like an unexpected embrace. It smelled of kelp and distant tides and something else, something almost freeing. Beatrice stood on the platform, her overnight bag gripped tightly in one hand, the letters pressed against her chest inside her coat. The village was quiet, the kind of place where time moved more slowly and everything seemed faded by sun and salt. She walked. It wasn't far to Primrose Cottage. Down a narrow lane flanked by dry stone walls and sleepy sheep in the fields beyond. Her boots crunched on the gravel path as she followed the signs, each step taking her closer to a woman she had never met, yet who had, somehow, lived parallel to her life for years. The cottage came into view just after a bend in the lane. It was exactly as she had imagined. Whitewashed, with blue window frames and a trellis overgrown with wild roses. There was a small wooden gate at the front, slightly crooked. A ceramic sign near the door read, Primrose Cottage, in neat, painted lettering. Beatrice paused at the gate. No one was in sight. She could turn back. But instead, she pushed open the gate and walked slowly up the path. Her heart beat so loudly in her ears she could barely hear the sea anymore. She stopped in front of the door and raised her hand to knock. She didn't. Not yet. Her eyes caught movement, a figure behind the window. A woman, older, maybe in her late 50s or early 60s. Her hair was pale auburn, pinned loosely. She wore a linen blouse, a cardigan draped over her shoulders. She didn't look like a threat. She looked ordinary. Beatrice stepped back. What was she doing? This woman had no idea she was coming. No idea someone was standing outside her home, holding a dozen of her most private letters, letters she probably thought were long buried with the man who wrote them. She turned away. But the front door creaked open. Beatrice froze. The woman looked out, puzzled at first. Then her expression changed, like she'd just recognized something in Beatrice's face. Or perhaps in her eyes. "You're Beatrice, aren't you?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but no words came. Amelia stepped fully into the doorway. "I thought you might come one day," she said softly. Beatrice's throat tightened. "I didn't know if I should," she replied. "I wasn't sure why I even." "Because you deserve the truth," Amelia said. "So do I." She stood aside. "Come in." Beatrice hesitated only a moment, then stepped over the threshold into the home of the woman who had loved her husband. The cottage was warm. Light filtered through lace curtains. There were books everywhere, on the table, the shelves, even the stairs. A kettle steamed quietly in the corner. It smelled like lavender and lemon cake. "Sit," Amelia said gently. "I'll make tea." Beatrice remained standing. "I brought the letters." Amelia's back stiffened. "I thought you might." Beatrice placed the bundle on the table. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Amelia turned, face composed. "I never meant to take him from you," she said. "And I never asked him to stay." The words felt like ice in Beatrice's veins. Because somehow, they rang true. Still, she had to ask. "Did he love you?" Amelia didn't look away. "Yes." Beatrice looked down at her hands. And then Amelia added, almost in a whisper, "But I think he loved you too. Just differently." Beatrice wasn't sure what hurt more, knowing that Edward had split his love, or knowing she'd never had all of him to begin with. The kettle whistled. Neither of them moved. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the roses along the wall. Inside, silence stretched, thick, impossible. Then Beatrice saw something on the mantelpiece. A painting. Small, watercolor. Familiar brushstrokes. She stepped closer. It was Edward. A portrait of him she'd never seen, older, worn, but his eyes still held that same light. It had been painted with love. By Amelia. And next to it, framed in gold, was a photograph, Edward on a beach, hand in hand with a small boy no older than 7. Beatrice's mouth went dry. "You have a son." Amelia's eyes met hers again. And Beatrice understood, this wasn't just about love or betrayal anymore. It was about everything Edward had kept hidden. And now, standing in that cottage, surrounded by a life that was never hers, she realized she hadn't found the end of the story. Only the beginning. His name was Thomas. Beatrice sat still, her hands folded in her lap, as Amelia spoke with the calm cadence of someone who had rehearsed this story in her head countless times. The boy in the photograph was Edward's son, born 7 years before his death. "He visited us once a month," Amelia said. "He told Thomas he was an old family friend. Said he never married. That he lived alone in London." Beatrice felt a wave of sickness rise in her chest. All those weekends when Edward claimed to be at conferences. The late returns. The birthdays he missed. He had been here. With them. With his other life. "Does Thomas know?" she asked quietly. Amelia shook her head. "He knows his father is gone. He doesn't know who he truly was." Beatrice looked around the cottage, her eyes landing again on the painting of Edward. His expression there seemed almost guilty, like he knew the cost of the lies he had built. "Why didn't you come to me?" Beatrice asked, her voice tighter now. "After he died. Why didn't you tell me?" Amelia exhaled slowly. "I wanted to. I wrote letters. I never sent them. I thought, maybe he would have told you." Maybe it wasn't my place. Beatrice stood abruptly. You had a child with my husband. You painted his face. You buried him in your garden, didn't you? With lavender and warm tea and lies. Amelia didn't flinch. I didn't steal him from you, she said softly. He gave himself away. Beatrice turned away, her hands trembling. She walked toward the door and stepped out onto the front path. The wind had picked up. The scent of salt was sharp now, biting at her nose. Down the lane, she could just make out the sea. The tide was coming in. Behind her, Amelia remained in the doorway. Beatrice, she called. But Beatrice didn't answer. She walked. Feet crunching over gravel, tears brimming but refusing to fall. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to move. Away from the house. Away from the truth. Or perhaps toward it, at last. The beach was nearly empty. A few gulls wheeled above, crying out in the wind. Boats bobbed in the harbor like forgotten toys. She sat on a bench near the shore, her coat tight around her. The cold made her feel more awake. Edward had fathered a child. A boy. And never told her. Not even when he was dying. Her eyes drifted to the letters in her bag. She hadn't read all of them yet. There were 2 marked with stars in the corner, his habit, whenever something was especially important. With shaking hands, she drew out the first one. It was dated 2 weeks before his death. My dearest A. I've written something for you to give to Thomas, should anything ever happen to me. I know it's late. I know I've been a coward. But he deserves the truth. So does she. There's another letter, addressed to B. I've hidden it in the sketchbook, the one with the Cornish cliffs. It's in the old studio. Please. Let her read it. Let her understand. E. Beatrice blinked at the page, heart pounding. There was a letter. For her. Hidden in a sketchbook. In a studio she had never seen. She looked up sharply at the sound of footsteps behind her. Amelia. She held something in her arms. A battered leather sketchbook. I didn't know if you wanted it, she said gently. It was in the loft, wrapped in a blanket. I thought you should have it now. Beatrice took it slowly. Her fingers brushed the worn edges. She turned the pages, past watercolors of cliffs and sea spray and wildflowers. And then she saw it. A folded page, tucked beneath a pressed daisy. Her name on the front. Beatrice. The envelope was yellowed, sealed in wax. Edward's handwriting, unmistakable. Beatrice looked up at the crashing waves, the sky hanging heavy with clouds. She wasn't ready. But she would read it. Soon. Because the answers were coming. And nothing would ever be the same again. The fire crackled in the hearth of the small guesthouse room Beatrice had rented above a quiet tea room near the harbor. She sat alone in the armchair, the sketchbook resting on her knees, the sealed letter untouched on the table beside a cup of untouched chamomile. The storm had returned that evening, rain lashing against the window panes, wind howling down the chimney like a ghost denied entry. But inside, the silence was absolute. Beatrice stared at the envelope. Edward's handwriting felt like an old photograph. Familiar, intimate, and somehow deeply impersonal now. She ran her thumb over the seal. For hours she had debated. Part of her wanted to burn it. Let the past smolder away in the fireplace. But curiosity clawed at her. Not to punish him, not to wallow in the betrayal, but to understand. Finally, with a breath sharp as glass, she broke the seal. The wax snapped. She unfolded the letter. My dearest Beatrice. If you're reading this, it means I've failed you in the worst way, by not telling you myself. There's no excuse. I could dress it in words like fear or shame or cowardice, but it would still be a betrayal. And for that, I am sorry. I loved you. Truly. You were the steady lighthouse that guided me through years I did not deserve. You gave me a home, a life, and a sense of purpose I lacked before you. But I was weak. And selfish. I met Amelia at a gallery in London. She saw something in me that I'd long buried. It began as conversation, became companionship, and then became something else. I never planned to stay in both worlds. But somehow, I did. Too afraid to leave one, too drawn to the other. Thomas, he was a miracle neither of us expected. I wanted to tell you. So many times. But every opportunity passed me by like a train I couldn't catch. And with each missed moment, the weight of the truth grew heavier. Until it crushed me into silence. You deserved more than half a husband. I want you to know something. I never stopped admiring you. You were stronger than I ever could be. Every time I watched you in the garden, or heard you hum while washing up, or saw how you touched the world with quiet kindness. I loved you. Even if I didn't deserve to. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I would give it either, in your place. But I needed you to hear this, from me. Amelia did not steal me. I gave myself to her. Just as I gave myself to you. My shame is not in loving you both, but in hiding it from the one who loved me most purely. Please, if you can, let this truth set you free. You are not the shadow I left behind. You are the light I never had the courage to stand in. Yours, always. Edward. Beatrice sat frozen. The letter slipped from her hands and drifted to the floor like an autumn leaf. She stared into the fire, her breath shallow, the words echoing in her mind. She wasn't the shadow. She was the light. It should have comforted her. But instead, it left her with a question she couldn't shake. If she was the light, why had he always chosen the dark? Thunder rolled over the bay. A knock came at the door. Beatrice blinked. She wasn't expecting anyone. She crossed the room and opened the door. Amelia stood there, her coat dripping, face pale. I'm sorry to disturb you, she said. But there's something you need to know. About Edward's last day. Beatrice stepped aside without a word. Because the letter had answered many things. But not the whole story. Not yet. The air between them felt thick, as if the rain outside had soaked through the very walls. Amelia stepped into the small sitting room, drooping onto the woven rug, her hands clenched tightly around a damp envelope. Beatrice gestured toward the armchair by the fire. Neither of them spoke as Amelia Saturday. The fire hissed as a log split, sending sparks into the grate. I should have told you this sooner, Amelia said at last, her voice low, as though afraid the words might shatter something delicate. But I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had. Beatrice waited. Amelia reached into her coat and handed her the envelope. It was already open. I found this after the funeral, she explained. It was meant for you. But by then, I was too much of a coward to send it. You deserved the truth from him, not from me. Beatrice unfolded the single sheet. The handwriting was Edward's, but rushed, scratched out in places. The date at the top was the very day he died. BEA. I'm coming home. I've made a mess of everything. I can't keep lying. I've packed a bag. I'm going to tell you about Amelia. About Thomas. About all of it. You can hate me. I'll deserve it. But I need to stop running. I need to face what I've done. I'm sorry. I'm so bloody sorry. E. Beatrice read the note 3 times, her heart pounding louder with each pass. She sat back in silence. I didn't know he was going to do that, Amelia said softly. He came here that morning, said he needed to speak to me alone. He held Thomas's hand so tightly. And then he told me, he was ending it. That he was going to tell you. That he wanted to fix what he could. Beatrice couldn't breathe. He left just after lunch. The storm had already begun. I offered to drive him, but he refused. He said he needed to do it alone. And then, Amelia's voice cracked. I got the call that night. The crash. The fireplace popped sharply, and both women flinched. Beatrice stood and walked to the window. The glass was fogged with condensation, blurring the world beyond. But she wasn't looking outside. He had been on his way back to her. To confess. To face the wreckage. And now she would never hear his apology spoken aloud. She closed her eyes. He was coming home, she whispered. Amelia nodded. I think he really was. Silence hung between them for a long moment, filled only by the fire's quiet hiss. And then Amelia said something unexpected. Thomas deserves to know. Beatrice turned slowly. He's your son, Amelia added. But he's Edward's too. And Edward was more than his lies. He was a good father. He told stories. He made Thomas laugh. He tried to give him a world of color and hope. Beatrice swallowed. And you want me to, what? Tell him his father had a second life. That he died on his way to confess it. No, Amelia said. Not yet. Not everything. But one day. Maybe when he's older. Maybe when he asks. And when that day comes, I want you to help me tell him. Beatrice felt a strange sensation then, like a door opening somewhere deep inside her. A door she hadn't even known was locked. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something close. She nodded, slowly. All right. A faint smile flickered across Amelia's lips, tired, grateful, sad. Outside, the rain had begun to ease. The wind softened. The sky beyond the harbor broke open just enough for a streak of golden light to press through. Beatrice looked toward it. For the first time in years, she could see a path forward, not free of pain, not without scars, but honest. Her own. And perhaps, she thought, that was enough. But just as she stepped away from the window, a thought struck her. Not everything had been explained. Not yet. She turned back to Amelia. There's something else, isn't there? She asked. Amelia didn't answer. She simply looked up, her eyes darker now. There is, she said. And Beatrice knew. The final truth was still waiting. The next morning came with an eerie quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a damp stillness that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Beatrice rose early, unable to sleep, the memory of Amelia's final words echoing like a riddle in her mind. There is. What was left? What more could there be? Amelia had departed soon after their talk, leaving Beatrice alone with the remnants of Edward's double life, an annoying feeling that something important still lay hidden. Beatrice walked the upstairs corridor with cautious steps. Her hands brushed the peeling wallpaper, her eyes tracing the familiar shadows on the landing. Without knowing why, she found herself at the attic door once again. She hesitated only a moment before climbing. The attic greeted her with the same musty scent of paper and dust, the same quiet hum of forgotten things. But this time, she moved with purpose. She crossed to the far corner, past the old tea chest and crumbling cardboard boxes, and crouched beside the loose floorboard she'd noticed weeks ago but never thought to pry open. A splintered edge gave way under her fingers. With some effort, Beatrice lifted the plank, and there it was. A tin box. It was small, unremarkable, locked with a simple clasp. But the weight of it sent a chill through her. Inside, she found a bundle of photographs. A velvet ring box, unopened. And a folded letter. Addressed, in Edward's handwriting, to be opened only if I never return. Beatrice's hands trembled as she opened the letter. My dearest Beatrice. If you're reading this, it means I've failed. I either didn't make it home, or I was too much of a coward to go through with the truth. You deserve more than I ever gave you. You gave me a life, steadiness, kindness, and a love I didn't think I deserved. But I destroyed that. And for that, I will always be sorry. There's something you don't know. Something even Amelia doesn't. Thomas isn't just my son. He's your nephew. Amelia is your sister. Half-sister. Your father's daughter. Born after an affair he kept secret until his death. I met her long after we were married. I didn't know who she was at first, neither did she. But when the truth came out, it only made everything worse. We were bound in ways we couldn't undo. I should have told you. But by then, it had all become too tangled. I wanted to protect you from the pain. And instead, I became the very source of it. If you can find it in your heart to forgive her, or me, I hope you do. But even if you don't, I needed you to know everything. With all the love I failed to show you. Edward. Beatrice dropped the letter as though it burned. The attic spun around her. Amelia, her sister. Thomas, her blood. She stared at the photographs, her hands barely able to lift them. One showed a young Amelia standing beside a woman Beatrice now recognized from old family albums, her father's secretary. It was true. All of it. The betrayal, the lies, the twisted root of everything, it didn't start with Edward. It started in her own family. The secrets ran deeper than she ever imagined. And the worst part? She had no idea whether Amelia knew. Beatrice rose slowly, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. Below her, the house creaked under her weight as she stepped down from the attic. Into a world that had just changed forever. The truth unraveled Beatrice like an old threadbare shawl. Her legs gave way beneath her as she sat on the edge of the attic stairs, Edward's letter clutched tight in one hand, her breath shallow and uneven. Amelia, her half-sister. The word made her chest constrict. How many times had she looked into that woman's eyes, tried to read her, tried to make sense of her bitterness? All along, they had been linked by blood. The same father. The same secrets. Hidden behind decades of silence. She stared into the shadows of the hallway as though hoping they'd answer the questions roaring in her head. Did Amelia know? Was this some long-woven revenge? Or had she, too, been caught in a storm of inheritance, abandoned truths, and misplaced love? Beatrice moved almost on instinct, her limbs operating like they belonged to someone else. She walked downstairs, letter still in hand, past the grandfather clock in the hallway that ticked like it, too, was holding its breath. She reached for the phone. Her fingers hovered above the keypad, her vision swimming. She didn't want to call Amelia. Not yet. Not until she knew more. Instead, she dialed another number, one she hadn't called in years. Beatrice. Came the soft voice on the other end. It belonged to Harriet, her father's longtime housekeeper, who had retired to Cornwall years ago. I need to ask you something, Beatrice said quietly, her voice hoarse. About my father. There was a pause. A long, cautious silence. Go on, dear. Did he ever mention a child? Another child. Outside of our family. Harriet sighed, and that sound alone felt like confirmation. I always suspected, she admitted. He had a girl who used to visit the groundskeeper's cottage. Said she was the niece of someone. But she wasn't. She had his eyes. Same sharp jawline, same temper when roused. He paid for her education, sent her mother money every month. But your mother never knew. None of us said a word. Beatrice closed her eyes. I need to know if Amelia knew who she was. Another pause. Then Harriet whispered, your father met with her, once. Near the end. I was there. He told her the truth. She was furious. Asked him why he hid her for so long. He cried. Beatrice couldn't breathe. She knew, she said aloud, but more to herself. She knew, Harriet confirmed gently. And I think she blamed all of you for it. Especially your mother. Especially you. Beatrice hung up, her hand trembling. The hallway stretched out before her, long and empty. The mirror on the wall showed a face she barely recognized. Her father had started this. Edward had deepened it. And Amelia had chosen to stay silent, all while planting herself in the ruins of Beatrice's life. This wasn't grief anymore. This was war.